Okay, we are now live.
Thanks, Amy. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Michael Stratton. I'm the chair of the Multimodal Transportation Commission, and I'd like to welcome you to today's meeting. This is our first meeting of 2021, so fingers crossed that we're going to have a much better year this year than we did last, and I am very hopeful for that. The Multimodal Transportation Commission exists to assist the city in furthering, advancing, and promoting a comprehensive, integrative transportation system that incorporates multimodal concepts, including, but not limited to, transit, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, greenways, complete streets, and highways. All commission members and staff are participating virtually today. We appreciate your patience as we work through the commission meeting a bit differently than we had when we were in live session face-to-face. We're streaming live on the Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link that's found on the city webpage, and it can also be found on the commission webpage. In addition, there's an option for public to listen live by phone by dialing 855-925-2801. Again, that number, if you want to dial in, is 855-925-2801. And you'll want to enter the passcode, which is 9466. Again, that's 9466. For those of you that are joining us today virtually, we just want to say welcome. We'll now go through and introduce the commission members who are participating today virtually with us. Please make sure that you unmute when it's your opportunity and mute yourself at the end when you're not speaking. If you have a question or you'd like to speak, please unmute your microphone or wave, just let us know. Please remember to mute your phone after you're done speaking. So I'm going to go through, introduce everybody, and please let us know which interest you represent. So we'll start with Randy Warren.
Hi, I'm Randy Warren, and I'm on the Bike Ped Task Force.
Good to have you today. Anna Sexton.
Hi, sorry, I had to hit my unmute. I'm Anna Sexton, and I am the Neighborhood Advisory Committee liaison to the Multimodal Transportation Commission.
Awesome, we're glad to see you. Joe Archibald.
Yeah, Joe Archibald, liaison from Planning and Zoning to the Multimodal Transit Commission.
Thank you. Glad you're here. Kenny Armstrong.
Hey, Kenny Armstrong, also on the Greenway Committee.
And I'm glad you're here as well. Next, we're going to go with Dennis Wenzel.
Hi, Dennis Wenzel. I'm on the Greenway Committee as well.
Glad to have you. Patricia Katz, I don't know if I've seen her come in yet, but do a little roll call. Are you here, Patricia?
What I mean, it's not bad by any means.
Okay, well, we'll move on. Next on our list, we've got Lydia Buer.
Hi, I'm Lydia Buer, and I'm also on the Greenway Committee.
Glad to see you. Maggie Ullman.
We'll leave it this time. I'll take it.
Hey, folks. I'm Maggie Ullman. This is my first committee call, although I joined and said hello last month. So good to have been appointed. Excited to get started with y'all.
Well, we're glad to have you officially with us. Welcome. Looks like Michael Waddle is going to be out today. And finally, we've got John Bassone.
Hey, I'm John Bassone, and I represent Transit.
Awesome. Glad to see you. And it looks like our liaison to council is here, Kim Roney.
Glad to join y'all today until 4, and I'll review the rest of the meeting after. And congratulations, Michael, on welcoming David to your family a little bit early.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, I am a brand new father, very, very early, unexpected father. My little boy is in the mission NICU right now. He's about 10 weeks early, but I'm very happy to report all systems go. Everything's working well. He's growing. He's really passing every metric that you could possibly hope for. So his mother and I, Amanda, are really, really, really happy to be new parents.
Congrats.
Thank you. Okay, so let's keep it rolling. So we're going to start with the commission agenda items. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud and do a vocal roll call anytime that we need to do a vote. Additionally, I ask that commission members raise their hands to speak, just to kind of help us guide through this, and then I'll call upon you. That way we can keep everything organized. All right. Bear with me. So first off, we are going to review and approve the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve today's agenda? Assuming that you guys think it looks good.
Yeah, I move to approve the agenda.
Okay, that was Kenny Armstrong with the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Randy Orr. Oh, sorry.
Okay, I think Dennis Wenzel came in a little quick, a little hot off the draw there. So he's our second, and I'm going to do a roll call at this point to approve today's agenda. So first off, we've got Randy Warren.
Aye.
Anna Sexton.
Aye.
Joe Archibald.
I'm good, but I can't vote, so.
Yeah, you know, I just realized that. So, but we appreciate the support from both you and Anna.
Yeah.
Kenny Armstrong.
Aye.
Okay. Dennis Wenzel.
Aye.
We've got Lydia Buer.
Aye.
Maggie Ullman. Oh, gotcha. I see the thumbs up.
In for the unmute, yeah.
Okay, there you go. And John Bassone.
Aye.
Okay. So moved. Good deal. So we're going to move on to the minutes now from the last meeting that we had that was on December 10th. So if everybody's had an opportunity to look at those and thinks that we're good, I'm going to call for a motion for the approval of last meeting's minutes.
Michael, it's Dennis. I'll move that we approve the meeting minutes from that date, whatever date that is.
Yes, so that would be December 10th.
December 10th, please.
Yep. All right, so I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And who was that? Sorry.
John.
All right, cool. So I've got a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the last Multimodal Transportation Commission meeting that was held on December 10th. And we'll go on to do a roll call again. So we've got Randy Warren.
Aye.
Kenny Armstrong.
Aye.
Dennis Wenzel.
Aye.
Lydia Buer.
Aye.
Maggie Ullman.
Aye.
And John Bassone.
Aye.
All right, so moved. Motion is passed. Okay, so next up, we've got public comment potentially. Do we have anybody that's left anything in the queue?
We do not.
Oh, that's too bad. We're going to have to do a better job of kind of getting the word out about this, y'all. That's something we'll need to work on. Okay, so moving on then, we're going to go to new business. So the first bullet point we've got on here is to appoint a new chair and vice chair for this commission. And as I was saying just a couple minutes ago, I have a brand new giant responsibility that I feel very unprepared for. So I need to open up some bandwidth for that. Also, I've been on this commission, or at least in the chair capacity, for about a year, which I think is a really good time frame for somebody to stay in this role. I really like the idea that people can kind of transition through, carry the water for a little bit, and it really helps. I think all of our members really have some ownership of this commission. So, we don't, no telling how this will move forward, but it'd be a nice precedent if we could look at a year every now and again for movement. I just think it kind of makes sense. But that said, I'm going to open up discussion about this regarding the replacement chair and vice chair. So let's take it away, you guys. Any thoughts?
This is Randy. We've had, actually, Michael and I had a little offline discussion for this small group, so we were legal, I think, with our discussion of that too. And my plate is such that I don't think I can take the chair position, or I could maybe if I had to, but I think I can stay a vice chair if you guys want to consider me for that. But we had talked to Dennis about possibly being the chair. I think that Dennis has some really good experience outside this commission, and I've really enjoyed his comments that he's made in the meetings we've had, and his enthusiasm for engaging in the group. And I think that he'd be an outstanding person. And we mentioned this actually to Dennis, and he is willing to do so. So if we would want to make him chair, I think I would endorse that fully, and he is prepared to do so. Me speaking for Dennis, but Dennis, I should let you speak for yourself.
And I'll have to concur with Randy. I think Dennis brings a lot of experience to the table, which I'll let him speak to. But he served on a commission or a committee that's been that was similar in nature to this one before he moved to Asheville. Also, I just think he brings a very even-keeled disposition to the table, which is really nice. And what I've learned about this role is that coming into it, I came in hot and heavy into the multimodal just as a member. But when I became the chair, I realized it's a little bit more of a diplomatic role where you've kind of got to herd cats a little bit and get everybody to come to an accord. And I do think Dennis is going to be able to bring that skill set to the table. But Dennis, do you want to talk a little bit about your background? And
Sure. I spent a little bit of time, about 8 years in total, in a very similar committee in a previous town that I lived in, and so I'm kind of familiar with the process and this process that how things kind of flow through. And I think Michael's right. It's we want to have a balance of good, healthy discussion and participation, but we also need to make sure that we're getting through all these items that come through us so we can be of service to the city as well. Of course, we're going to certainly miss you as our chair, Michael, but we do, we're all very excited and happy for you. And, the fact that you're sleeping about probably 20 to 30 minutes a day now, we understand that you're looking to get a little time on the side to take care of your young son.
Well, I appreciate that, but I really do appreciate the gravity of the work that's done in this commission. It's something that really touches a lot of different, really, high value topics in this city, and I think whoever is going to be putting themselves in this role needs to have a little bit more bandwidth than I'm able to have. So I hope you guys understand that, and I want you all to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to continue to serve out my term here, but just be a little bit different capacity. Go ahead, Kenny.
Yeah, I'll just voice my support for having Dennis Wenzel as the chair and keeping Randy Warren as the vice chair. I think that would be a really good team.
Awesome. Is that a motion?
Why not? Unless there's no further discussion, I move that Dennis Wenzel become our board chair or commission chair, and Randy Warren stay on as vice chair for a year minimum. Do we need to put a timetable in there? Or?
I don't think we need a timetable. In fact, I'd say let's keep that open, just okay. so people can have some fluidity. Okay, well, very good. I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Was that John?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I have a motion and a second to add Dennis as the new chair for 2021, and Randy is going to continue on as the vice chair. So we're going to go to a roll call vote on that motion, and we'll start with Randy.
I think actually we have to ask if there's any more discussion, and then we can go to roll.
Yeah, very good. Is any more discussion about this item?
Yeah, just thanks both of you for stepping up.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close the discussion now, and we will start the roll call vote. All right, Randy.
Aye.
Okay. Kenny?
Aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
Lydia?
Aye.
Maggie?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
All right, motion's passed. Well, congratulations, Dennis and Randy, and we look forward to your leadership and big things for the rest of the year. So we are going to move on. Let's see where we're at. Let me find my place. So the next bullet point under new business is the CARES Act transit funding. We'll be getting an update from Amy, I believe, or Jessica. Okay.
Amy's gonna run the slides for me, and
okay.
I'll do the talking part.
Gotcha. Joint effort.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. I just wanted to spend a little bit of time today giving you an update of where we are with our CARES Act funding, specifically for transit. And we'll talk a little bit about the follow-up stimulus bill that was approved several weeks ago that unfortunately didn't give us any money. And so we're in a little bit of a tight spot, and I will go over all of that with you guys in this presentation. So I'm going to talk about what we've spent to date of our CARES Act funding and what we have remaining. And then I'll give you an update on the new appropriations bill. Next slide. And feel free to stop me anytime during this presentation. It's not a super long one. So if you remember, and for those of you that are new, we were very fortunate to get some funding support from the federal government through the Federal Transit Administration from the CARES Act that was specific to transit. And we got approximately $8.6 million for the whole Asheville region. And we are the designated recipient for the whole Asheville region. And we are obviously the largest transit system in the Asheville region. So our portion of that funding was the largest portion of all of the different sub-recipients that we have with us. And so our portion was about $3.67 million. And the rest of the region, which includes Buncombe County, Henderson County, and Haywood County, got $4.9 million, and that was split amongst them. And the formula that's used to split those funds is the same formula that's used for transit funds, for urban transit funds. So it's essentially based on population. Next slide, please. So that, I can't remember exactly when that bill was passed, but it was probably like April or May or so of last year. So kind of in the beginning few months of the pandemic, we had already started spending money to deal with the pandemic pretty much immediately. And getting word that we were getting those funds was definitely something that we needed. And we have spent quite a bit of it so far on various things, including some of the obvious things like PPE, which we continue to purchase, cleaning supplies, signage, and public notices and public information. We also have purchased and installed on the majority of our buses some barrier doors, which are doors that serve to kind of encase or insulate, if you will, the drivers. And those doors have been installed, and they really were not intended for something like COVID. They are originally designed, and the purpose of them when they were created by the company that makes them is really just for like safety from physical assault. But it does provide at least some measure of additional protection from COVID-19, but it's definitely not like airtight. So we have been struggling for the last several months, well, really the last year, trying to get barrier doors installed in our Proterra electric buses. We have 5 Proterra electric buses, and we ran up against some challenges in working with Proterra to get doors designed so that they could be retrofitted to the buses we have. We got word last week that we finally have gotten the design information from Proterra to the manufacturer of the barrier doors. So I'm hopeful that now we have that in place. We should be getting those. I'll say soon, but I don't know if it's a month or 2 months or 3 months. Nothing about working on this particular piece has been simple, even though you would think it should be. So we spent $145,000 to outfit all of the rest of our buses, which is the vast majority of our buses, and we are going to spend probably another $25,000 or so to install doors in the 5 Proterra buses. The biggest thing that we have spent money on and is the Young Transportation contract. So for those of you that aren't familiar with that, when we had to drop the capacity of the buses down to 10 people, including the driver, we obviously started leaving people behind. And so we looked at multiple different options of how could we find a way to continue to try to pick some of those folks up. And because, our buses hold 24, 25 people, if we're limiting it to 10, we've essentially cut our capacity by more than half. So we contracted with Young Transportation, which is a private charter company, and they've been in business since early 1900s. And so they're part of our Asheville family. And so they were very excited to help out with this because they had lost pretty much all of their business as well from, chartering weddings and football games and so on. So we originally contracted with them. We thought maybe all of this would have been over by December. And so our contract was started June and went through December, and it was for $960,000 or $920,000, I forget which. And obviously that ran out, and so we had to extend that contract by another $560,000. We thought that might get us through the pandemic, still in the pandemic. We started out with Young on helping us support multiple routes. They also were helping us pick up routes that were overcrowded. And as of now, we have them just working on 4 routes, Monday through Saturday. And so we have been able to scale them back slightly, but we still continue to spend about $25,000 per week on that service, which is a lot of money. In my opinion, though, it is making a difference because they're picking up between 400 and 500 people a week. And those people obviously need to get somewhere. And so to me, it's as long as we have the money, we should try to continue to do that. So if you would go to the next slide, please. So in addition to the Young contract, we have also been using the CARES Act funds to provide, to support the administrative costs and time for staff members of our contractor, our transit contractor, RATP Dev, who have to take leave because they have either contracted COVID or they have to caretake for someone in their family who has, or especially in the beginning when it was taking 10 plus days to get a test result. We had lots of instances of staff members in transit who had to be out to wait for test results. And so the CARES Act, one of the primary things that it thought to do was to help support the administrative leave for folks that had to be out because of COVID. We continue to do that. We still have transit operators who are getting COVID. I think right now we have 4. And so we want to make sure that we are funding their time so they're not having to take their own sick time or their own paid time off. So the $322,000 that we have provided to RATP Dev includes that, but it also includes in the very end of December, some of you might have heard that the city wanted to do a one-time, I don't know if bonus is the right word, but a bonus for frontline staff and essential workers, city employees, but also they wanted to do the same for our transit employees, even though they're not technically city employees. So there was a payment that was made right at the end of the year. And for the transit workers, for all of the frontline employees there, which included the drivers, of course, customer service reps, dispatchers, and supervisors that have public interaction, those folks received a payment at the end of the year, and that was in total about $144,000 worth of hazard pay or bonus pay.
Do you know about how much that was per person, or did that range depending on everybody's salary? How did that break down?
It was, if I remember correctly, it was if you were a frontline, like a driver, it was $1,000 if you were a full-time employee. If you were part-time, it was half that. If you were on site, but not necessarily frontline, so for example, like a mechanic who's maybe not interacting with the public directly quite as much, it was, I believe, $750, and then half of that if you were a part-time employee. And it was similar structure, exact same structure for city employees as well.
I'm glad to hear there was some headway made on that. However, I'm sure we would have made that payment more if we could, and I would imagine that we would all advocate for that. Is there another one of these bonuses projected on horizon?
Not at this time. We would definitely need to see another round of stimulus funding to help support that, which I'm crossing my fingers that we may see, but I'm not holding my breath either. So, other things that are not necessarily direct expenses, but are obviously related to COVID, is the fare loss that we have incurred. So we stopped charging fares almost immediately. So I think it was late March or mid-March. And our fare revenue, isn't very big to begin with, but It's between $50,000 and $60,000 a month. And so if we assume that we're going to go all the way through the year, sorry, that should actually say March 2022, to the end of this current fiscal year, then we would see close to $550,000 of fare loss. So that's something that we have to take into account. Additionally, some of you probably remember me talking about how our state legislature last year, when they were coming up with the budget for the current fiscal year from the state, they decided that since the transit agencies across the state got federal CARES Act revenue or federal CARES Act allocation, that we wouldn't need our state transit funding allocation. And so we receive about $1.1 million annually from the state, and they took that away from us this year. So in order to make up for that loss, we are using CARES Act funding for that as well. So that was a huge chunk out of what we were given, and it's very unfortunate that was lost. I'm really hopeful that they won't do that again for this coming fiscal year, but there's no telling what they're going to do for this coming fiscal year. So we've spent about $3.28 million at this point, and we only received about $3.668 million. So we're getting really close to our to what we were given. Next slide, please. So just over the next few months, if we continue to see our HTC staff have to take time off for COVID, we think that would be another probably 50 grand or so if we keep seeing that happen, which I fully expect we will. I don't know, just like the rest of everybody on this call, when we're going to be moving into future phases where we can get transit staff vaccinated. They are considered essential staff, essential frontline staff who are in group 2, I think. And so they're definitely in a higher group than like I am, for example. And so my hope is that happens in the next couple of months. And I'm also hopeful that we might be able to coordinate with the county to see if we can get them vaccinated as a group, perhaps. But I can't even get any communication with the county on that right now, because I'm sure they have a million different questions coming to them about this. So anyways, once that happens, then, hopefully we see less expense related to administrative leave. We also might be able to reinstate fares, which is something that we'll have to discuss, because, obviously the fare revenue is good for our bottom line, but it's not good for everybody else's bottom line. So that's something that we need to think about. So the big thing that we're struggling with right now is that we still have about $400,000 left of service contract with Young. And if we spend all of that, then we will have essentially spent all of our CARES Act money, which means that we'll probably, as a transit fund in whole, we'll probably go into the red, because we'll continue to see fare loss happening and expenses. We were very much expecting, perhaps stupidly, expecting that we were going to get additional allotment of transit funds in the next stimulus bill, and we didn't. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So the second bill that was signed a few weeks ago, called the CRISA, it allocated about $14 billion in total to transit agencies. The CARES Act allocated about $25 billion. So we were expecting another allotment using the same formula of distribution, just a smaller amount, since it was, 25 billion with CARES and 14 billion with CRISA. So we were expecting to maybe get another $1 million, and I felt very hopeful that we would get that and that could carry us through. We didn't get it. The Congress put in a rule in the bill that essentially said that if your agency got more than 75% of what it would normally get in a year with CARES Act money, then you weren't going to get any more with this new bill. And so the CARES Act had allocated to us actually about 86%, and you can go to the next slide, Amy, about in our region, about 86% of what our region would normally get, or 88%, in a normal year's funding for our transit system. So because of that, we did not receive any funds in this bill. And I think the reason that they did that was because the CARES Act, the way that everything kind of shook out was that mid and small transit agencies, which were definitely not one of the big guys, it was sort of weighted more towards us, or these smaller agencies getting more money. So agencies like, New York, San Francisco, Chicago, the big cities, they didn't really get, I guess, the same proportion that the smaller ones did. And so to correct that, they kind of flipped it so that they would get the bulk of this next round, and the ones who got more in the beginning would get nothing. So I now what I'm hoping for, and I'm still not holding my breath completely, is that it sounds like there's still talk about another stimulus bill, and I have read that the proposal right now is for $20 billion for transit. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be divvied up the same as they did in either the CARES Act or the CRISA Act. So what we need to do now is we're going to look at some of the data, see how many riders versus how many riders is Young helping us with versus the total ridership. Can we find any more funds to continue Young, or are we going to need to scale them back a little bit and stretch them as far as we can? Can we shift more of the work to RATP Dev, which is fully dependent on how many staff they have in, working or out with COVID. So there's kind of a lot of moving parts, but over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be taking a hard look at what we have and look at our overall budget and see if we have any savings in other areas that can make up for not having any more CARES Act funds and keep Young working. Because even though we're still leaving people behind even with having Young Transportation help us, but they're, like I said, they're helping carry 400 to 500 people a week, which is significant in my opinion. And I don't really want to stop that. And so I'm going to try and look in the couch cushions and see what we can do to not have to cut that before it's really not necessary anymore. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So drivers at this point are starting to come off the roll. I've noticed that a lot of these buses are driving with all the windows completely closed up. I mean, this might be minimal, but is there a way we can at least open windows in the bus, make the space a little bit safer for the people that have to be in there all day?
They don't open.
Well, I mean, the Young's bus, I don't know about them, but I've definitely seen our buses' windows do open.
Not all of them. The older ones, I think some of them do, but most of our fleet doesn't have windows that open.
That's too bad. This is when I really wish we had those old 1920 style trolleys with the open windows.
Yeah, most buses have moved away from that, not thinking about the situation that we're in, but the less moving parts, the less that breaks. And so it's become pretty much the norm to not have windows that open and close. And now, obviously, we wish we did, but
okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. But I don't know about Young's buses. I can ask them about that.
Yeah, I mean, if they open, that's great. But spitballing here, Anna, what are you thinking?
So I have a question. A little bit of context to my question is, I've been reading that there are some city departments where there are essential workers who are saying that they're not going to want to get vaccinated when the vaccine becomes available. And I was wondering if, with regards to the bus drivers and contracting out with them, if there may be some sort of option to provide incentives for those workers to get vaccinated, or exploring some sort of creative option like that.
That's a good question. And I will talk to Barry Reiling, the general manager, and see if their company is doing anything as a whole. And if they are, then great. And if they're not, then it would be something that we'd have to figure out locally, if we could do some kind of incentive. I hate to have to think that you have to incentivize someone to do that, but it's a really good point. And I think, I feel pretty strongly that we need to have drivers vaccinated, but they're also not our employees. So we'll see. I think one of the things I want to do is maybe take a preliminary poll also of their staff to see if we can get a sense of how many are planning on it. And I also am interested in Young's drivers being included as part of that as well. So, to me, they're frontline essential workers now as well, because they're helping us. So having that whole group, which could be as many as 150 people, see if we can get the bulk of them vaccinated as quickly as we can. But it's definitely going to be a county decision. But incentives is a good idea, and we'll look into that.
Thank you.
If, to piggyback off that, if we end up having another round of bonus for frontline workers, perhaps it could be contingent on, folks' willingness to get the vaccination.
Yeah.
Because if you're not trying to minimize your risk, I don't know if you should put your hand out for the frontline bonus.
Mm-hmm.
Legally, that might be something that legal needs to weigh in, but that would be something I'd be very interested to know about.
Okay, I can look into that. And to be honest, I don't know how the city is going to deal with or not the fact that we have other departments, like Anna said, that aren't, some folks are not interested in taking it, and I don't know that the city has a response to that, and if they will at all. It's obviously the battle between personal rights and the rights of the community. So I will definitely look into that and should be able to get you guys some information that I could probably send out via email after the meeting. Any other questions? It's possible that we might have to make some decisions prior to the next transit committee meeting and multimodal commission meeting. And so we will keep you guys updated as to what we plan to do. Another thing, sorry, I forgot to mention, another thing that we're looking at is should we increase the capacity of the buses again back up to 13 plus a driver? That might allow us to serve more people and scale Young back and stretch those dollars even farther. So those are all the variables we're looking at right now.
Maggie?
Just kind of curious, as a advisory committee, or the capacity that we play, are there it sounds like you're juggling service, it sounds like you're juggling COVID response, it sounds like you're juggling budget, and that you're going to have to make some decisions at the intersection of all those pretty soon. Is there any specific feedback, advice, communication that you seek from us, or is a lot of today just like keeping us up to speed and in track with like how things are unfolding for you? Just because I want to marinate if there's any specific focus input that I could provide, but I'm also happy to listen and know what's going on.
Thank you for that. That's a really good question. It's mostly just to update and let you guys know what we're dealing with. I will say though that if any of you are interested in advocating to our legislators that they please not cut our state transit funding again next year. And if they can even restore some of the funding they cut from us this year, that would solve the bulk of our problems right now. So I would encourage you to do that. We have, as staff have done that, and it's really disappointing that was the decision that they made. And I just am hoping they don't make that again for this FY22 budget.
So I've got a question on that one. This one's actually for Kim. Do you guys have a formal delegation that you can liaise with between the city and the state on matters like this?
Thank you so much.
Do that?
Yes, thank you so much for asking. As I was hearing the conversation, it came to mind that that's one of the things that we can do is reach out to our local delegation on this matter. So I will definitely carry that forward to the full council. And I can circle back with the chair, which I have from my notes. We have a new chair.
It's Dennis now.
Dennis, yes. So I'll circle back with Dennis that so we can work on making sure we have good communications back and forth leading up to what we can do next.
That's fantastic. And I think it's a really neat tool that we can use from time to time. And I really appreciate going through the motion on that one. But Joe?
Thank you, Kim.
Actually, you know what? I think Dennis had requested some time first, and then we'll go to Joe.
Thanks. Jessica, the installations that we're doing in the buses, do they have utility beyond COVID? I mean, can we use these to keep our drivers safe? Is this something that the investment might actually extend beyond the next 6 to 9 months?
Absolutely, yeah. We had been looking at them previous to COVID solely for trying to make it safer against like physical assault, which is something that unfortunately happens, occasionally in the transit industry. And so the drivers were very much interested in them prior to COVID. We were looking at them, but hadn't figured out how we were going to pay for it yet. And so, you know, we pulled the trigger when COVID happened and we got CARES Act funds. That was one of the first things we started to work on. And it was what every single transit agency across the country wanted at the same time as well. And so it took several months to get them in place. And we, like I said, we still don't have 5 of our buses equipped yet. But the primary purpose of those barrier doors is for protection against assault. So they will stay there. We will have them forever. And so we also have buses that we have about, I think, 5 or 6 buses on order right now. Some of them are arriving later this spring. Some of them are arriving next year. Every new bus purchase we make will include that as a standard from now on.
Excellent. And so we're all on board with maintenance, that we're not going to remove anything once the vaccination happen. Everybody is aware that we really like these things. We want to keep them.
Yeah. They will be standard practice and installed in all of our buses. Great. From here on out. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're going to Joe, and then I see Kim has got her hand up.
Let Kim go first, because I know she said she was only here till 4. So.
Okay.
Thank you. As I'm making the notes about what I'm going to carry forward in my liaison role, I don't have a formal recommendation from this group, but I know that it's in the last retreat goals to not only seek additional funding, but also to protect the funding we have. So just letting y'all know that I don't currently have a formal recommendation to carry that forward to council.
Are you asking for one, Kim?
Well, I mean, I guess what I'm suggesting is that if this group would like a formal recommendation to suggest that the council reach out to the delegation around the state transit funding, that would strengthen my role as the liaison and the voice of this group, which is in the scope of your role.
All right, folks. So basically, what we started the conversation with asking Kim about. We're going to do that in a formal capacity at this point. So I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we recommend as the Multimodal Commission to the City of Asheville that the state reallocate its original funding schedule for local transportation departments. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else we want to put on that. You guys want to talk this through? We can kind of talk this motion through if you guys like.
Would be
perhaps. I was just going to say perhaps it's something to the effect of reinstate the state transit funding support to local agencies and include it in next year, in FY22 budget as well. Something like that.
Reinstate and maintain, so we don't want it to decrease. It shouldn't decrease. The CARES funding is for additional support. It wasn't to substitute for money that was already allocated. So that was an inappropriate use of their budgetary discretion to take away money that was, it's kind of like using lottery money for schools. You're not supposed to use it for school funding. You're supposed to use it for additional funding. And it's right. Been something that's been inappropriate. And this is the same thing. So,
right.
So I'll second the motion.
Okay. Well, let's get it out a little bit more cohesive than I did the first time. I'll try again. Reading these motions right off the flyer is not my favorite, but I will try. So I'll make a motion that the Multimodal Commission, Transportation Commission for the City of Asheville recommend to the City Council that they liaise and ask what the local delegation to the state that funding the reinstatement. Sorry. That funding be preserved and maintained as it was originally allocated prior to COVID-19. Does that capture it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can massage it a little bit.
I appreciate
Tim.
that. Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Randy's got a second for me. Okay, so I've got a motion and a second. We're going to go through a roll call at this point so we can get this up to council.
Discussion.
Is there any discussion? Okay, I'm not hearing any discussion, so we're going to go ahead and do the roll call. I get so antsy with these. I like to get these votes going. So we'll start with Randy.
Aye.
Okay. We're going to go with Kenny.
Aye.
Dennis.
Aye.
Okay. Lydia.
Aye.
Maggie.
Aye.
John. Okay, I see a thumbs up, but let's see if we can get some audio on that. You're muted. Okay, I'm gonna affirm that I did indeed see John. There you go. There you go. Good deal.
Like, would not. My screen was frozen. Sorry about that.
Okay, well, we got you captured, and then I'm gonna go on the record as an aye as well. So the motion's passed. So we appreciate that, Kim, if you work on that for us.
Yeah, right now what I have is that motion to recommend to council that they ask the local state delegation to advocate that pre-COVID level transportation funding for local agencies being reinstated, preserved, and maintained. So Jessica, if you just want to let me know if that like reflects what we have.
Yeah. Did you have the word transit in there specifically somewhere? If not, I'd suggest adding that.
I'll put transit funding instead of transportation funding.
Okay, that'd be good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, Kim. We really appreciate that. Okay. I think we're ready to move on.
Well, I have one quick question, Michael, for Jessica. Sure. If you have a few more minutes, Jessica. I know, last year that, and partially, well, mostly because UNCA wasn't in session, and they pulled back their funding for the route that runs through UNCA. And I regret that I haven't really paid attention to what level UNCA is operating on, even though I live down the street. Is that like, I know the bus is running. It's running more than it was when we weren't running those. It was like the late night hours and stuff. I'm sure that has been part of the discussion to pull that back, or has UNCA reinstated their full funding? Like, where is that? I guess it's a question, and two, it would be, at least from me, and I would put this out to other committee members, like, is that a place where we could start to pull back again, just to stop finding, like you were saying, finding ways to try to pull back the budget?
Right. We did, I think in October, we cut that late night service. We did some data collection and worked with the transit committee to see just how many folks were using it, given that UNCA had essentially shut down, and it was very, very little. And I think we also talked with the Multimodal Commission about it back then too. And so we cut the service based on recommendations and the fact that UNCA wasn't going to continue to pay for it. So I think we had decided to cut it for this entire, for their fall and spring semester. And if they do come back in session, then we can revisit it. It was only like a $20,000 savings, but we did that in October.
Yeah, that was part of it. I couldn't remember if it was only going until the end of 2020 or if it went through like their school year, i.e. to essentially May of this year. So
yeah, my recollection is we said through the spring semester. And we'll keep tabs with them. That's another we cut that expense, but on the revenue side, they were a partner in our passport program, which provided funding. We usually got about $45,000 in passport partner funding, which we haven't gotten any of either because we're not charging fares, so we're not going to charge our partners to that too. So that's another revenue loss that's included in that fare loss, overall fare loss. So it's like you take one step forward and 3 steps back.
Jessica, would you guys ever consider doing like a pre-sale on annual passes for the bus service? I know there's a lot of people right now, myself included, that for safety concerns, and then also like not to preclude other people from riding or just not utilizing the bus system. And I know that myself and my wife are absolutely going to be bus riders as soon as we can. I know right now I'd buy an annual pass today that I wouldn't be able to use until, let's say, next year or the following. It might be a way to stimulate some funds now that can be used.
That's a good idea. I'll talk about that with staff.
Cool. Okay. Anything else, guys?
One last quick one. Jessica, I think I did hear you say you were considering, or at least there were going to be discussions about maybe increasing the capacity of the buses back up. I'm assuming that may become more of an option as at least drivers get vaccinated. I mean, obviously there's still the public that's riding, but obviously a little bit of a balance there, which then can start to pull back Young's portion of what they're doing. Because it does sound like they're providing a very, very essential. I remember the last time, I didn't see it in this pack of information, but I remember the last time you had included it, and it was hundreds of people, and it was just like this. Yeah, you can't get rid of that right now.
Right. No, I definitely. I mean, getting our drivers vaccinated. Everybody should get vaccinated, but I really am hoping that we can get that soon-ish, because then I think it'll just start to help us get back to more normal operations. And as when we move into later phases, I still think that we might be able to make some changes and move to a higher capacity, but I don't anticipate. I'm not seeing a whole lot of change in any of the numbers, and so it's very much a balance of wanting to provide service, but also wanting to make sure that people are safe, and it's very difficult. There's no perfect answer either, right? Like the capacity numbers on the bus are pretty arbitrary. We're just trying to figure out like that right balance, and there isn't one.
Maybe it's dumb for me to ask, but I'm assuming the health department's helping you maybe decide, or are there any is there any guidance coming from anybody on it? Do you know of?
Well, so generally speaking, no, they're not. They haven't been in communication with us, but I don't fault them for that at all, because I'm sure they've got so many people saying that they've got frontline employees and that need vaccines, and so I have
from the capacity limits on buses. They're standards where they're kind of saying, given if your positivity rate, even nationwide, if the % positive rate is this, or if you're having community spread, are there anything?
No, and to be perfectly honest, our state guidelines are, that you should be. So let's, the restaurants, for example, they were 30%, now it's 50%. If you were to apply that same standard to the bus, that was kind of what we were going by. However, it still required 6-foot social distancing, which even with 10 people on a bus, it's less than 50% capacity, but you can't always ensure social distancing. So even from that standpoint, I can't say that we were wholly consistent with the guidelines, because it was pretty impossible to achieve. We'd have like 3 people in a bus. So,
if a family unit gets on together too, or anybody who's sheltering in place, then that counts as 1, not as 3. And so it's almost impossible to really regulate that strictly, because different groups of people could, if you have everybody who's an individual, you need fewer people than if you have people that are family units too. So it's an almost impossible situation.
I can tell you that yesterday I looked at Charlotte, Raleigh, Chapel Hill, and Durham just to see what they're doing. Now, keep in mind, they all have bigger buses than us. They probably are using 40-foot buses, and I think Charlotte even has maybe larger ones. So their buses are larger, therefore more capacity. I don't know exactly how many people they can seat, but Charlotte's limit per bus is 20 people. Raleigh's is 16 people. Chapel Hills is 16 people on a regular size bus, which I'm guessing is a 40-foot, and 21 on a articulated bus, which are those bendy buses. Those are typically like 60-foot buses. So there's 16 on a regular bus, 21 on an articulated bus, and Durham is 16. So they're all higher than where we are right now, but I also think they are all using larger buses than we are.
Well, if we end up going up on our capacity, I would really, really strongly hope that we could enforce the mask mandate that now applies to the transit system. If you guys recall, that was not in the cards up until recently. So our bus drivers couldn't tell anybody to get off the bus if they weren't wearing a mask. But now, I think one of the most recent governor's orders that is included. So that being said, I feel a little bit more comfortable with more folks on the bus if the Young's buses go away, but only if we're good about enforcement.
Yeah, and we are enforcing it, and I think our compliance is really good. Last I've heard, we've only had issues with maybe 4 or 5 people who have been banned for 15 days because of refusal to wear a mask. But other than that, it's been high compliance.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jessica.
Okay. So let's move on to unfinished business. We had discussed the idea of changing the meeting date and time after we spoke, but we wanted to wait until the poll had went out to kind of get a sense of what everybody could and couldn't do. Has everybody had a chance to fill in like when they can and couldn't meet? Okay. I noticed that it looked like the best couple of days, looking at tabs week 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm really zooming in on week 1 for a couple of reasons, mostly because it seems to be the week that's the most filled in. In particular, I'm looking at the 3 o'clock and the 3 to 5 o'clock meeting time. That would be either on Wednesday or Friday. Those seem to be the most green. I'll say this, Friday, it seems like a good one, but a lot of times people are out on Friday. They go on vacation, or they're just not around, or they're having a 3-day weekend. So that might not be so good for attendance if we were to do that. Wednesday's fine with me. I will say one thing about week 1. I like the fact that puts us before the next city council meeting, because they meet on the second Tuesday of the month. Although, as Jessica had mentioned, it's not necessarily as strategic as we think, because we might make a motion now, but unfortunately, one of our motions and recommendations, a recommendation that we make today might not make it to city council meeting until 40 to 60 days later, which is a very long timeline. But nonetheless, I think we've got a really good advocate that's working for us now, in Kim. So maybe that timeline could not necessarily be 40 to 60 days. So I still think it's a good idea for us to meet and have our meeting before, or at least the week before council does. But I'm interested to know everybody's thoughts on all this. Does everybody have that document pulled up, or is they able to look at it?
Yeah, Michael, I have to apologize too because I didn't realize there was 4 weeks to prepare, so I put week 1 was my availability for the whole week.
Okay.
Me too. I did the same thing, exactly. So mine's like for the whole month.
I'll make a quick comment, Michael. Planning and zoning meets on the first Wednesday of the month. And so just from a city technical standpoint, you know, that may become an issue to have multiple meetings at the same time. So just FYI, especially when it moves to physical space again, whenever that.
Yeah, and we would definitely miss you if you weren't here.
Oh, no, I was literally thinking like the city being able to, like, certainly I know that it has been a problem when we've tried to do planning and zoning, has tried to have some mid-month meetings and things, and we've had to juggle dates because they have other meetings or it conflicts with council, and like literally the fact that IT can't make it work to have multiples.
Well, just have P&Z move their meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point. What are everybody else's thoughts? If not Wednesday, I still think Friday is the next best day, at least what's filled in. But again, we have that Friday dilemma of people taking 3 days.
Hey, Michael, Dennis here. I kind of agree with you about Fridays. I feel as though I'm not as attentive as I probably could be most Fridays at work. So sticking to that Wednesday. And if there's a way that maybe what we could do, even though there is some kind of intrinsic value in having our meeting right before, maybe we go to the third week so we can get that input from city council, anything that's coming down, so we can deal with it pretty quickly and then give the staff a little bit more time to turn that stuff around. So they might have 2 weeks or 3 weeks to go ahead and bring it back in. So my thought is maybe going with that Wednesday afternoon and the third week of the month.
Okay, which time slot were you looking at there?
The 3 to 5. I did fill them all out, but to be completely honest, they're all exactly the same. Week to week, it doesn't really matter to me. It's just how my weeks stack up is very similar week to week.
Okay.
It looks like the second week Wednesday from 3 to 5 is a little bit more open for everybody than week 3.
Yeah, that does look to be the case.
But
I was going to say,
meeting on Friday, I'll do it, but I don't really want to.
I don't really want a Friday meeting. And to Dennis's point, and honestly, I would imagine that the staff would like the additional time too if we were to do that second one. I'd given then 3-4 weeks before the next one, or no, that'd be the same week. So there'd be 4 weeks between then and the next. Yeah, I don't know. It gets kind of convoluted because the council meets a couple of times a month, I think, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think for staff, whatever you guys like, whatever week of the month or day of the month is fine. I think one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about this was whether having it from during normal business hours is conducive to getting public input, and so I think it's worth having a conversation about that. From a staff perspective, we can accommodate that, which is why we put a 5 to 7 p.m. option on there. And obviously there's pros and cons to that for everybody, but I think it's worth talking about whether you guys think it's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea to be inclusive, but I think we have some data at our disposal at this point. At every one of our virtual meetings that we've had the opportunity for people to leave comments and feedback for public record. And I think we've had one person do that so far. And that was in our last meeting from Claudia. So, the virtual meetings have opened up a little bit more ability for people to voice their opinions. And I think the fact that hasn't really happened, I would probably defer to the group as far as what they want at this point. But that's just what I think, because I really don't want to meet after hours.
I was going to say, I think that's mostly just due to the whole COVID thing. I mean, I think we had, when they were in-person meetings, typically there were people there.
Yeah.
Commenting, period. And I think going back, it seems like end of 2019. I know it came up, the whole meeting time came up at the retreat last year, and it may have even gone back to before then. But yeah, that was a big part of it, was how do we make it so that it's either better for the community to either come or make comments, or that it allows people who may want to be part of the committee, then it's outside of the working time, normal working hours, so that people could volunteer more. So, I mean, I don't know. Personally, I would prefer it's outside of working time. To me, the 5 to 7 isn't bad, but again, there are some benefits to it too. So.
Thank you for bringing that point up, Joe, about trying to accommodate bringing on new commission members. That's something that we struggle with, is being more inclusive in terms of recruiting our committee and commission members, and whether or not moving the time to 5 to 7 would help that. I don't know. I don't know if the city's ever done that with a committee or commission or board. We could also just wait until we get back to quote unquote normal, whatever that is.
I mean, it seems like a lot of this, planning and zoning, city council, there really isn't much that meets evenings. I mean, almost every other commission is kind of a late afternoon. Affordable housing is in the morning. But yeah, there's really nothing that meets at a later time after business hours, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really, looking at the schedule, it seems like the time we're at now is probably kind of the best time. And in some ways, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because all of us could meet at that time in the first place on the commission. But for this group right now, it seems like it might still just be the best time.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Randy. I feel like maybe the idea that maybe Jessica just said, we kind of table this for a couple of months till we get back in person, and then revisit it to see, because I think we do have to juggle if we are meeting at off hours. I don't really, my work day is typically kind of 8 to 5, and so if there was a meeting at 5, I wouldn't be able to complete my work day and get to City Hall for a meeting. So I don't know that we're gaining all that much by moving 5 to 7. Maybe it's like a 6 to 8 or something like that. But then we're involving staff time after hours. Is that something we want to do? So I think it's kind of juggling those two pieces.
Well, then I would suggest, if you guys want to keep the same time but switch the week, that we could start there. And then as we move ahead with COVID and how the city, I'm hopeful that we get back to in person, but maintain the ability for folks to be able to participate online as well. It could be some kind of hybrid situation. I'm hoping that that's what we end up with. And so we could revisit it at the time of day portion later as well.
I also hope that we get to keep some of this virtual, because I know one of the things that we wanted before COVID happened was to have our meetings put out on video, and that seemed to be an insurmountable problem, which we were never able to fix. But now we have it, and it's been really nice to be able to go back and look at video and figure out exactly what was said, because sometimes our minutes are not always available immediately. Okay, guys, so it sounds like we want to table this one for a little while until we get to a sense of normalcy for a bit.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Do you need a motion, you think?
I don't feel like we do. What do you think, Jessica?
I think if you're leaving it all the same, then we don't need to. If you change the week, maybe, but if not.
Yeah, I think at this point, the second and the fourth week seem to be equally as good. And since we're already the fourth one, it's best to maintain what we have, because if there is some stability to the date, then that might help in terms of if people wanted to come to the commission as well. So this is not really, doesn't seem like much of an advantage to move to the second week. Just keeping it as is seems to be, at least for now, a prudent thing to do. And then I don't think we need a motion because they're not proposing to change anything.
Okay. That seemed cogent to me. Okay. Well, if we're all good on that, then we'll move on. But I'm glad we had an opportunity to at least talk through that. It sounds like we'll get to talk about it some more as things progress. So the next one on the agenda here for unfinished business is an update on the citywide speed limit discussion that we've had a couple of times. Jessica's going to give an update on that.
Thank you. This is kind of a quick update, not a whole lot of new information to share other than we have met internally, particularly with our legal staff, to see whether or not it appears that we would be able to have a city-wide speed limit, and all signs are pointing to yes. And when I say citywide, I basically mean changing the statutory speed limit, which is currently 35 miles per hour for all jurisdictions in the state. The proposal is to change it to 25 miles per hour. Now, that does not mean that, so a statutory speed limit is basically like when you see the sign coming into town that says, unless otherwise posted, the speed limit is 35 miles per hour. So it doesn't change speed limits on like state routes or streets that are posted with a different speed limit. It's basically setting the default speed limit to 25 is the proposal. So it appears that we have the legal ability to do that. What we next need to do, and have not unfortunately had a chance to do yet, is speak with NCDOT, the State Department of Transportation, just to confirm that we can and that they have no issues with it. Again, we wouldn't be proposing to change speed limits on state routes like, Tunnel Road and Hendersonville and so on and so forth. It's by and large, it's mostly local city streets. And we have in the past been changing speed limits on a lot of the local residential streets down to 25 miles per hour. And every time we do that, we have to go to council, and council has to pass an ordinance saying that the street speed limit is now 25 on X, Y, and Z street. So if we were able to do kind of this blanket default of 25 miles per hour, I think it would actually save staff time, because then we wouldn't have to go to city council pretty much every other month to change that. The other part that we have to do that we haven't had a chance to do quite yet is work with APD and just make sure that they have no issues or major red flags that we're not aware of. In theory, it could either result in less people speeding, or it could result in more people speeding and more people complaining about speeding if you're lowering speed limits, which then could translate into more calls to APD. That's kind of an unknown, right? So we want to touch base with them and see, hear what their thoughts are on it as well. Any questions?
Yes, and then Kenny.
Jessica, yeah. So I think that makes complete sense. I feel like the streamlining some of this stuff, I think is a great path forward. I felt like when we were in a couple of months ago in this meeting, we were talking about some of the other streets that might be state roads. So Swannanoa River Road, Biltmore Ave, McDowell, those types of things. So in this kind of step one, those are not going to be included. Is that right?
Correct. And, we don't have any jurisdiction over those streets. So if we wanted to explore a lower speed limit on state routes, then it would have to be with NCDOT and approved by NCDOT, and then actually approved by the State Transportation Board. So it's a little bit more complex, but it has been done before. For example, we've been talking with DOT about, and actually we may have already done it, lowering the speed limit on Amboy. So it is possible, but right now I think the emphasis is on our local, what we have control over, which is the bulk of the miles. But obviously the streets that we see the most crashes on are typically state routes, because those are the busier, higher speed routes. So this is not covering all of that.
Yeah, and to that point, I think the rub that I think we're heading toward is, as we promote and see an increase in bike and ped activity, these folks that are new are using it for transportation or commuting, and so they're going to be commuting on these minor and major arterials, and those are the streets where we have that big rub, where we have a sidewalk right next to a 40-mile-an-hour path, a road,
right.
And so that's where that kind of fear comes in. So I think this is a great first step, but I really would like to see if we can maybe what it is, we just make a list of them. Here's all the ones that we really feel like we're seeing a lot more folks on. It's really scary when you're walking and a car, is hitting the curb when they're driving by you, that kind of thing. And so maybe what we can do is make a list and then submit that through the state. And it sounds like it's an arduous process, but if we could do it as a group, we might be able to get some efficiency in our process.
Mm-hmm. Understood.
So would a good step be then for us to make that list? What would you recommend for us as this board?
If you don't mind, if I could think about that a little bit.
Sure.
The thing that comes into mind at this moment is that there are a couple of corridor studies going on right now that the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, initiated and is working with the city and the state and actually Henderson County on. And those two corridor studies are Tunnel Road and Hendersonville Road. And I believe that that they're looking at, it's a very high level corridor study, so it doesn't include design or anything, but they're looking at speed limits in general as a component of overall safety, right? So I think that in some ways we might be able to make some headway sooner through those corridor studies, like embed recommendations into those studies that give us more support. And also, I forgot, we also are doing a corridor study for Biltmore McDowell. And I know that's one of the things that's being talked about in that one. And Biltmore, down through the hospital area, like that's in my opinion, a place that we really should look at a lower speed limit. Anyways, yeah, I think that we could come up with a list and like the path towards getting there, which might be slightly different for different roads.
All right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think that's it for me. If you want, Michael, I can just go straight into transit, and then I do have one staff update, but that's after the other committee updates.
I think Kenny had his hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Jessica, I was just wondering, so if you change it from 35 to 25, do you know how many streets that actually affects? Because it's only the ones where it's not posted otherwise. Are there any streets that aren't posted?
Yes, there are. I can't tell you how many there are. There may not be as many. I know there's not as many as there once was, because I know that in the last 2 years, we've probably taken through, I'm going to say 40 to 50 speed limit changes down to lower speeds. So I couldn't tell you how many more there are because there's so many, small residential streets. But for all intents and purposes, the default speed limit change to 25 miles per hour may not really be a huge additional number of streets.
Maggie.
So as a new person to the conversation, I'll be eager to read back on minutes of like where some of the why is for this surfacing for the group. But I love that we're having the conversation, and just a few kind of points. One, I feel like I read data that lowering it even further might have better impact than 25, that get it as low towards maybe even 20, especially in residential. So that would be something to consider, or just dust off what the research says, because I'm not fresh on it, but I feel like I've heard lower. The other thought is that I feel like if safety is a major part of the goal, and I don't know if we have a goal statement for why we're having this conversation, but I would love to read what our collective goal statement is, or we could write it. I assume safety is part of it, and for my understanding that speed limits and enforcement are like a really strong low-hanging fruit stepping stone to actually having safer places. And that design, like the corridor studies that Jessica is talking about, is really where we're going to get the like transformative leverage to have a safe experience and less deaths and less accidents and things of that nature. So Dennis, as you were talking about like getting that list and us looking at what those streets are, and then Jessica, you were bringing up like where the corridor studies are, I think that there's like an overlay of advocacy and strategy we could apply where it's like, okay, step 1, lower the speed limit. And these are our corridors. And then before we even start that, have the conversation of like, what's step 2 and where does that fit into other planning studies? Because again, if safety is our goal statement, I think it is low hanging fruit. We should totally tackle it, and we should use the win of it, because it also sounds kind of like relatively easy. Use the win of it to lead to a next ask that pushes it further towards even greater safety.
And Maggie, just real quick, so this came from the Bike Ped Task Force, and safety is absolutely at the essence of this. Speed differentials are huge in terms of impact and severity of crashes. And so if you're hit by if you're on a bicycle going 15 miles an hour and hit by a car going 35, you have a much higher incidence of severe injury or death than you do if it's 25. And the same thing from a pedestrian. If a pedestrian's crossing a street and gets hit by a car at 25, and certainly 20 and 15, it's even better yet too. The difference between 25 and 35 is like a 70% increase in the option or the opportunity for fatalities. So safety is at the heart of this recommendation for sure. But I think you're right in terms of having a bigger term vision. We don't necessarily have the 10-point system set up and how we're going to achieve Vision Zero, which the city and state both fully committed to, but yet the city doesn't have a Vision Zero task force, which they also committed to having too. So I think one of the first steps in the thing that you're talking about is to push hard to have the city establish the Vision Zero task force that is committed right now to doing, but hasn't done yet. And then once we have that, we can have hopefully a bigger plan with safety as the number one goal.
Yeah.
Cool. That's exciting.
Sounds good.
Well, there kind of was. I know when Vidila was in transportation, he was trying to do the Vision Zero thing. But it also too gets back to is APD going to enforce it? Are we going to have enforcement? Which then I'm going to bring it up again because I'm just going to keep hammering it. Speed cameras.
Right, and just that point, Joe, too, I mean, we also, as a Multimodal Transportation Commission, have a recommendation to city councils to use automated speed enforcement devices. And so I think after Jessica gets through with the speed limit thing, right, that's the next thing on your list, is to see how we can do that. And that's going to take some legislation action, and so we'll have to have some advocacy on the city's part to have our state legislators get a provision passed at the state level, make that happen. So this is kind of the lower hanging fruit of those two recommendations, and then the next one will be a little bit more labor intensive.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I was even when Maggie was talking about, what's the next step. I mean, that was kind of one of the things that popped up, but it is certainly one knowing that we have a former MMTC transit committee person on council now in Kim Rooney, and it could easily be another one of the motions like we just made earlier of, Kim putting before council to work with the local legislatures to then help us get to those steps that we need to at the state legislature.
Yeah, I mean, we've already made the motion. The motion says we've unanimously approved that. So I guess part of it is making sure that Kim understands that is a motion, and working with her more closely to have her bring it to council in a way that's effective.
Right.
I'd say step 3 is the engineered solutions, which are going to be a little bit more costly than all of that, but something that we should be really advocating for as we build our city for the growth that we're going to be experiencing over the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah,
Well, that goes into,
you probably have an update on the traffic engineer, right? That we don't have a city traffic engineer right now, but isn't that currently in search?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Still in the recruitment phase for that.
Can we redesign the city's standard street drawing so that they're designed for 25 instead of 35? Because I feel like if people feel comfortable driving 40, they're still going to drive 40 even though the speed limit's lower. I feel like it has to go hand in hand.
I mean, to Michael's point, I've seen it in some parts of the city of Asheville, so just like coming a little bit late, but like the road diets and really putting in like bump outs because the visual effect slows people down.
Yeah.
Just at some point, can we have a little bit longer dialogue? I know we're running on time, but I'm curious to know what happened in the rad tip. It's a 25 through there, but it's a straight shot. There was it seems like zero thought given to engineering slower speeds through there. Other than the sign, there'd be nothing to tell you that that's a slow street.
You mean like on either side of the roundabout?
I'm saying from like Amboy Road, just all the way down the whole length where the vehicular traffic goes. It's just straight. And no speed bumps, no bump outs, no nothing. And for that to be like the showcase of what's good, it seemed like we really missed an opportunity on that. And I blame we probably had an opportunity as a commission to discuss that too, but I think it's worth reflecting on.
Yeah, I don't know. I can add that to a possible future agenda item.
Yeah, I've just been curious to know how that happened, but happen again.
Okay. Any other questions? Would you like me to go into transit real quick? I mean, I pretty much gave you guys the main transit update. There's a memo enclosed in your agenda that's from our transit planning manager, Eunice Lovey, that gives some updates about other projects that we're working on. There's some information in there about our mask distribution statistics and where we're at with the art station project. We're about to install the public art piece of that, should be going in the next, I'm going to say, month or so. And we're also working on the digital signage installation for the art station. We're about to bid out the electrical engineering piece of that. And then once that's in, then we'll be able to install the actual digital signs at the transit station. We're also installing digital signs at Pisgah View Apartments and at UNCA. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we've got some new buses that'll be coming to us in the next several months. And we just upgraded all of our buses with brand new Motorola radios for communications. And we've also upgraded some of our operational software that we use to monitor on-time performance and analyze route performance. So we've been doing a lot of stuff in transit other than just trying to deal with COVID. We're still working on lots of other pieces as well. And I do expect to bring to you guys probably in March, maybe April, where we're at with our maintenance garage feasibility study.
I just want to highlight something on here that I think deserves a little bit of attention. Anytime this happens, I think it's important to elevate it. French Bread Metropolitan, the MPO, had done their regional transit feasibility study. And I've in particular had highlighted this part here, but it says members of the public that had attended the virtual meeting shared that they would like to see more frequent local service as well as an extended geographic area to ensure more connections among transit service offered in the region. So there's just a little bit more weight behind, expanding our service whenever that's going to happen. It's worth elevating. Dennis?
Thanks, Michael. Jessica, do we publish, I went through and I couldn't find it, but do we publish any ridership numbers or utilization rates by route?
I think, trying to remember if in the RATP Dev report, in that link, if that's included. We probably don't, I know we probably don't do a good enough job of reporting holistically ridership from month to month, like a summary roll up. We have that information, and we probably need to figure out a way to include that more readily.
Okay, yeah, I couldn't find it, but I mean, it's entirely possible that I'm missing it. You all create so much detail on this. It's really you paint a very clear picture. It's excellent.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see it. So I think that's something that we need to start including. Thank you for asking.
Great, thank you.
So I know that in the past we've had buses that were early, but this is bordering, I mean, it's unbelievable how many we have early now. 25%, 22%, 20%, 20%. So, I mean, it's like almost at least a third of our routes are around 20% of their buses are early. And we're already leaving people as it is, as you say, because we can't have capacity issues. So it just makes it like with Michael, I'm not taking the bus right now either just because of safety concerns, but there's nothing worse than showing up for a bus that comes once an hour and it got there early and left early. And yet we have a lot of routes that have a lot of buses coming early. That just seems like that's an avoidable situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to ask staff what's going on with that, because that's been something we've been really trying to emphasize. I know one thing we were having a problem with, but I don't know if it's been fixed or not, is that the system was counting arriving early to the transit station as early, which is not necessarily a bad thing to arrive at the transit station early, but I don't think that accounts for the majority of these percentages. So let me get some information on that as well.
Yeah, my guess was, because I can't remember which one of these I looked at, but we were getting, it seemed like better on time performance, like it was more or less on time a lot, like, what was it, 80%? I think like August or July. It was like, oh, that's great. But of course, then it was kind of COVID-y time. And that would be my only guess, is maybe there's more traffic now than there was, say, back in June. But I'm wondering if that's part of the earliness, is still slightly less traffic, plus maybe less riders. So like some of the buses just aren't stopping at stops they normally would. So you figure there's that, if you're not stopping at a stop, say 2 or 3 stops that normally you would have, you're going to be 5 minutes early, that cumulative. And I'm sure some of the roads, they can't like pull over and wait, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're supposed to have places where they can quote unquote lay down, is what they call it. And just to make sure that they're not getting to that next time point too early. But yeah, we shouldn't have, 20%, 19% early arrival. So it's something that needs to be addressed, or at least I need to have a better understanding of what's embedded in that, and if there are valid reasons or invalid reasons for it.
I just saw the S5 go down Fairview Road at about 40 miles an hour, which is a 25-mile-an-hour zone. Maybe if they did the speed limit through residential zones, that would help.
You need to have a flag outside your house, Michael. MMCT community,
Yeah.
I'm going to turn you in.
Anyway.
Just so quick with it turning in, I just want to commend Jessica. I had an incident with the bus, and I emailed Jessica about it immediately, and she responded immediately, and then Young Bus Service responded as well immediately. So that was a good response over a potentially hazardous situation. So I appreciate that the response that we had. I didn't hear the resolution because I think if they're unionized, you're not going to hear it. But Jessica and the staff responded really well to that kind of thing. So maybe the flag outside the window does work too.
I was going to make one other comment, Jessica. I did see the piece in that report from Eunice about the the maintenance garage. I was kind of encouraged that was still moving forward, even though I know it's an expense that you're probably like, boy, if we could cut that might be. But it's also one of those things I know that needs to happen. So
yeah,
it's good that it's moving forward.
Yeah, we're in the phase right now that we're looking at, the first part was figuring out how much space we probably need, like a range. And then now we're looking at parcels that fit that range, which is helpful, but also not super helpful because we could find a parcel that we think would be perfect and it's not available, So it's somewhat of a futile exercise to get really detailed about specific parcels, but part of what we're looking at is like the balance between the cost of being farther in or closer in versus farther out, and land costs and such, what are those tipping points? So we should have some good information in a couple months. We should be wrapping that up.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see and look forward to that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. We good to move on? Yeah. Okay. Do we have any committee reports? Does anybody have any committee reports? Transit. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, Randy, do you come from Bike Ped?
Sure. For Bike Ped, we had a relatively light agenda, but the great thing was that NCDOT, we have a committee member that works for NCDOT, and so he gave us a lot of information, which is something that we don't always get. So the funding is starting to loosen up, and Jessica probably knows more about this than I do, but loosen up from the state again, where basically it's stopped completely. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily on a real even basis. So, for example, the Mills Gap project, the funding has been lifted to be able to move forward with that project, but there's no right-of-way funding. So they can't actually acquire property for it. But there is at least some movement in terms of that. And then we've received a lot of pushback on Meadow Road, for example, which is in horrible, horrible shape for cars, but alone for bicyclists and pedestrians. And so there's been a lot of discussion over the last couple of months on Bike Ped and a little bit here in terms of how do we approach that situation. And because of some of that conversation, it's raised its level of importance on NCDOT's radar. So it's good. So some of that conversation is actually making it through to the staff level there, which is great. And then we had a lot of discussion too about the NCDOT's portion of Amboy, the bridge that at the end of the RADTIP project and the connectivity issues that are happening there too. And so that's not an easy fix at all, because bridges are done differently than everything else, its own department. And I think that the funding for that the project is scheduled for 2029. And so we're looking at, again, how to maybe move that up on the list of priorities for NCDOT. And again, some of that attention that's being brought to it, especially now the RADTIP has been completed. And now there's this big missing link. And if we're going to have to wait 8 years to have something done about that link, it's just way too far. And so they're exploring more opportunities in terms of trying to get that fixed. And as well as the traffic light timing there and all sorts of other things too. So a lot of times things don't happen right away, but if there's enough noise being made about things, NCDOT seems like an impossible nut to crack sometimes, but it does have some impact.
That's great news, Randy. Anna, what have you got for us?
Yeah. Is it appropriate to just chime in about that Amboy Road piece really quick? As far as the bridge is concerned, I know that's really far out, but even some sort of when you turn off of was it Lyman at that point onto Amboy, even some tiny bit of connectivity between the new Greenway and cycle track and the bridge, I think would help immensely. I think that there's room there to do it, even if it's some sort of sidewalk, something, because there is a gap there where there's just there's nothing connecting it. So even having something connecting to the bridge for pedestrians would be great.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. Okay. It's a huge issue, and especially the sidewalk across the bridge isn't even wide enough to accommodate a wheelchair, for example. So it's a huge issue, and people are complaining about it a lot in ways that are taking some notice. But yeah, we should keep that on the forefront of our attention, because that's what is moving things a little bit more, giving things a sense of urgency that wasn't there before. So hopefully that'll happen. So thank you for
that. Lydia?
I'd like to chime in on two things. NCDOT does pay attention to noise. I've seen it happen. I've worked a lot with DOT, and the more projects, the more, I know there's a project in Wilmington that the people talked a lot about. And so that project kind of got pushed up. And then the second thing, I kind of had a question for Jessica. I know NCDOT kind of likes to split, in a weird way, multi-use paths. And I know funding is not great with the city, but has there ever been, or would there possibly be future talk of splitting costs of a multi-use path on the bridge so that maybe that prioritized with the NCDOT as well?
Yeah, actually, so they recently passed a new complete streets policy. I guess maybe it's been about a year now. And if the city includes something in its transportation plan that says we want a multi-use path here or sidewalk even, then as part of their complete streets policy, they're now required to include those facilities essentially at no charge to the local jurisdictions. It used to be that there was a cost split situation, but that's not the case anymore. So it's imperative that in our local plans and through the planning processes that we do with DOT, that those facilities are included, and then there is no cost share anymore, which is great. And so we have been talking to DOT about the bridge a lot. We have been trying to encourage them to seek a short-term fix, like Anna's talking about, with maybe striping out an extra part of the lane or putting up some vertical delineators to at least have a little bit better connectivity. And they're looking at that right now. So they are hearing us, and they're hearing the public on that specific issue right now. And they are looking at whether or not they can take right-of-way funding that is available earlier, right-of-way funding that had been allocated for the whole Amboy Road project, if they could do kind of like a shuffle of that funding and use it on the bridge, and then bridge funding would come in and replace what they had allocated for right-of-way funding for the whole Amboy Road. So they've heard and they're looking at opportunities. And I do agree with Randy that I think it's a combination of the noise, but also because the rad tip project's been completed, it just makes the insufficient facilities that much more obvious.
Should the Multimodal Transportation Commission make noise to that effect?
Sure.
So I know that if we tie that little connection to a DOT project, it's going to be a long time, presumably, before it gets built. Do we need to lobby the city to try to raise funding for some kind of like a wooden cantilevered sidewalk to attach to the bridge? I mean, something that we could do a little bit quicker with a little bit. I don't know. I'll chip in $100.
Kenny's barge service.
We told them that we would do, that if it was like a striping vertical delineator kind of thing, which doesn't necessarily, it wouldn't be widening the existing sidewalk, but it would presumably create a space for, at least if someone had a stroller or a wheelchair, they could use that space. We told them we would do it. We would pay for it and we would install it, but they need to assess the dynamics of that with turning radiuses and, all the things, because ultimately it's not our bridge, right? So we do need their approval to do whatever we do, but the cost of a short-term solution would be something that we could pay for. And so we're prepared to do that if and when they give us the okay to do it.
And just real quick, to their credit, they are exploring a lot of different alternatives, and some of them they decided aren't workable, unfortunately. Like they thought about shifting the traffic all over to one side of the bridge so they can give a wider lane, on the north side to be able to get people through there too. But the bridge isn't structurally sound enough to be able to do that because it would shift too much weight to the side. So they are thinking about those kind of creative solutions, but unfortunately, it's a really old bridge, and it needs to be replaced. Even if there wasn't an Amroy project, the bridge needs to be replaced. It's reached the end of its lifespan. So. Or not quite yet, but it's in the, I forget what the categories are. There's 5 or 6 categories that break down. So, talking about that.
Is there an option to keep the existing bridge for bike ped? And so when they build the new project, presumably they're going to build a new bridge. A lot of times they just knock down the old bridges, keep that bridge and have that be the bike ped loop, and they have a separate bridge for vehicular traffic. Is that something that's come up at all?
That's also part of them exploring the shuffling of the right-of-way funds. And that could be another alternative that we look at as a separate, vehicular bridge versus pedestrian bike bridge.
That'd be great. Any more thoughts on this, guys? Okay.
Yes, but I'll try to keep it brief. I mean, even exploring beyond the bridge, more towards the the Smoky Mountain, or whatever it is, on Amboy Road, where the entrance to French Broad River Park is. Is that something where we could also work with NCDOT or whomever to create just a more... People speed on Amboy a lot. It's a huge problem, but even creating some more of like a multimodal zone in that area where there are a lot of just roads coming in, gravel lots, people coming in and out of those in their cars, to kind of create almost like a buffer before you get to the bridge and kind of create an environment where everything is just slower through there, even if we can't deal with the bridge right now. That's not super coherent, but that's just a thought that I had while we were talking through this.
again, Jessica might know more about this more than I do, but there is an Amboy Road project that's in the works, and so it is supposed to address kind of those issues too, to make that road, because it was speed limit was 45 and they dropped it to 35, but you're right, there's still, they didn't do any changes to the actual road structure, just drop the speed limit. But they are going to do a redesign, adding in bike ped facilities and stuff on the roads eventually. So, and it'll all tie together, but it's just a long ways down the road, unfortunately, at this point in time. So I don't know if they would do many temporary measures unless it was really low cost, because they do have this plan. And then sometimes when they have a longer term plan, they are reticent to do some of those short-term fixes because they figure what's all going to be taken care of anyway in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, So.
Okay. All right. I see Kenny, and then Kenny, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just had a Greenway committee update if we're ready to move on, but if we're still talking about.
Okay. Well, before you do that, I think John had something real quick. We'll take that as a last comment on this before we move on.
So how does the committee make noise? So that's what. How would we go about doing that to push the Department of Transportation to do something sooner?
So here's what I'm going to suggest, and this is something I had an opportunity to talk to Dennis about. But we have a lot of new members here, and we have a lot of passion on this commission. And typically, what happens is once a year we have a retreat, and we have an opportunity to spitball and brainstorm and really, just chart our trajectory for the next year. That didn't happen this year because of COVID and staffing and funding and stuff like that. So what I would recommend, and like I said, I talked to Dennis about this. I think this group should figure out a way to meet virtually, and spend a little bit more time, even if it means a second meeting that we have to go on the record about, or just taking one of our agenda and kind of allocating about half the agenda toward the conversation of what exactly this group does and how we can affect change, because we really need to figure out how we can make moves. So that's something that I think Dennis is going to try to put on his radar as we move forward.
But there
might be a two-part issue.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry, Randy.
I said it might be a two-part thing. So I think Michael's exactly right. We need to know how we can make noise and when it's appropriate to use what kind of noise. The second part, though, is that if we want to do something now, but maybe we want to wait till the next meeting, but we can make a resolution. We can make a motion that we pass on to council saying this and this. And that way, once council knows that resolution, then they can direct staff to work with NCDOT, perhaps in this case, to push for these agenda items already. And so they're already doing that. But if they have more support from our commission, then that just gives them more background. And then staff can say, it's not just us saying we want to do this. We have the citizens of Asheville pushing hard through these commissions and things like that to have this happen. So that's just in the short term if we want to do that. But Michael's right. We should make sure we know as a commission long term, like how can we make noise about things in the appropriate way for whatever is appropriate at the time.
Yeah, and I'd really like to figure out how we can better understand our group, how it functions. I mean, we have subcommittees, we have neighborhoods. Theoretically, the bubbling of any action should happen in these subcommittees, and then it should be advanced up to this level where we kind of articulate it as a talking point that we want to pass along to council. So that's why it's really important that everybody go to your subcommittee meetings and get a sense of ownership when you're there, because you're kind of the conduit between that meeting and here and council. Okay. I feel like there was somebody else that had something. No? Okay. All right. Are we going to go along to Greenways? Kenny?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a note from Lucy. She wanted to convey that the committee voted to work with RiverLink to conduct a public engagement effort on the proposal to change the name of the French Broad River East Greenway, which is the new one, to the Wilma Dykeman Greenway. There's going to be a survey released in February, and if there's not any public objection. I think the city council will have it on their agenda in March to officially approve the name. And she wanted to let you guys know that the Rad Tip project is going to have a month of celebration starting on Earth Day, which is April 21st, and ending on Wilma Dykeman's 100th birthday, which is May 21st. And that'll be the official date for the rollout of the new name of the Greenway. And she said that the town of Woodfin is also considering, as they advance their Greenway along the river, to call that part of the Wilma Dykeman Greenway as well. So kind of a cool naming progress. Other than, you know, it's not great to just call it the French Broad River East Greenway. So it should have a name in the near future. That's it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nick. Okay. I think that's got us through. Anybody else have anything? Okay. And the reason this is kind of sporadic, like I'm asking, is that some of these subcommittees haven't met. Some have. So that's why it sounds like it's a little off. All right. So staff updates. Jessica, what have you got for us, or that hasn't already been said?
The only thing I wanted to call attention to is also from Lucy, related to greenways, and it's just to report that we applied for a planning grant to do a feasibility study for the next couple of sections of the Reed Creek Greenway, and we submitted that application at the end of the year, and the grant through the MPO, and we asked for $40,000, I think, from them to help us do those next little steps in getting, you know, closer to construction for the next phases of that greenway. And so the application is linked to your agenda, as well as a map showing what those next two sections are. So I just wanted to, Lucy wanted you to know that as well.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for that update. So moving on, unless there's any questions or discussion there. Okay. So we've got a list of future agenda items. Y'all take a look at those. If there's anything that you want to be added to this list for the next agenda, anything that's top of mind for you that you really feel passionate about, reach out to Dennis or Randy, and those are the folks that are going to get those action items on the agenda. So just make your case to them, and they'll work with you. Beyond that, I guess we didn't have any public comment unless anything's come in. But other than that, the next meeting, I've got it listed as TBD. Hopefully we'll start moving to once every 4 weeks, but that still remains to be seen at this point. But I think this is a good meeting. We worked through a lot, and I appreciate having a full roster today. And I really appreciate working with you guys as chair over the last year. It's been really good, and it's been my honor and pleasure. And I'm really looking forward to passing the virtual gavel on to Dennis. So with that, we'll call it meeting adjourned.
Great. Thanks, Mike.